And the masters of the universe, the most powerful man in the universe,
Defender of the secrets of Castle Grayskull.
Grayskull.
If those 5 words just sent a jolt down your spine, you already know exactly why you're here. We're going deep today into the saga that launched 1,000 plastic swords and made an entire generation of kids believe they could transform into something greater. It's a story that's part mythology, part Saturday morning ritual, and part cultural landmark, and it still holds up in ways that are worth talking about properly. Picture it, 1983. You're racing home from school, backpack bouncing, desperate to make it before the opening credits. Your He-Man action figure is already in your pocket, battle-worn from the previous afternoon's adventures. The TV clicks on, and suddenly you're in Eternia, a world that looked like nothing else on television and felt like it had been invented specifically for you. 4 decades later, people still talk about this show with a warmth that goes well beyond nostalgia. Because He-Man wasn't just action figures and animation cells, it was a story with an actual moral backbone, a cast of characters worth caring about, and a mythology deep enough that even now, most fans never knew the full picture. There are origin stories that got buried, there are endings that never happened, and there are layers to this world that the cartoon never got around to telling. The world and heroes. The world and premise. Eternia wasn't just another cartoon backdrop. It was a fever dream collision of sword and sorcery fantasy and futuristic technology. Like someone threw Conan the Barbarian and Star Wars into a blender and hit puree, then somehow produced something coherent out of the chaos. When the show first hit airwaves in 1983, nothing else looked like this. Mystical castles sat alongside laser cannons. Ancient magic coexisted with hovering vehicles and robotic soldiers. The aesthetic should have been a mess, but instead it felt genuinely original. A world that operated by its own internal logic, strange as that logic was. At the center of everything stood Castle Grayskull, that iconic skull-faced fortress perched on a rocky outcrop, holding secrets and power beyond imagination. Whoever controlled Grayskull controlled the fate of the entire realm. That was the central conflict, the axis every episode orbited. And it gave the show a clarity of purpose that a lot of children's television lacked. You always knew what was at stake.
Thanks for your help, He-Man.
The heroes. Prince Adam seemed like the last person you'd pick to save the universe. Blonde, carefree, almost deliberately goofy. The kind of guy who'd rather crack jokes than crack skulls. His own father thought he was lazy, and the royal court had essentially written him off. The gap between who Adam appeared to be and who he actually was formed one of the show's most quietly satisfying tensions. Then he'd raise that sword, and everything changed. I have the power! And with those words, the transformation happened. Lightning, thunder, Cringer becoming the mighty Battle Cat, and a prince becoming the most powerful man in the universe. What made He-Man genuinely worth admiring, though, wasn't the transformation. It was the code that came with it. He never killed. He always found another way. He showed mercy to enemies who had shown none to anyone else. That moral foundation burned itself into young viewers' minds in a way that stuck. Strength wasn't about destruction, it was about protection. Fighting alongside him was a crew that felt like the ultimate action figure collection come to life. And not accidentally, since Mattel had a very direct hand in shaping who made the roster. Man-at-Arms was the father figure and weapons master, the guy who always had a gadget or a battle plan, and whose steady presence gave the team its backbone. Teela, captain of the Royal Guard, didn't need rescuing. She was usually too busy doing the rescuing herself, running flanking maneuvers while He-Man kept the villain occupied. Then there was Orko, that floating purple wizard who couldn't cast a spell correctly to save his life, whose magical failures were both the show's best-running gag and, oddly, one of its most endearing qualities. Ram Man, Stratos, Man-E-Faces, each brought something distinct to the fight. Together, they made defending Eternia look like the greatest job in the universe.
Ram Man, you said it right.
I did? Oh, I did.
The women of Eternia. Teela deserves particular attention because what she represented in 1983 was genuinely unusual. She commanded soldiers. She challenged He-Man directly in combat and gave him real competition. She didn't wait for rescue because it didn't occur to her that rescue was a thing she might need. She was competent in ways that actually mattered to the story. A warrior, a leader, someone who'd earned her position through skill and courage rather than having it handed to her. Her relationship with Adam was also quietly fascinating. She had no idea he was He-Man, and the show used that gap well. She had genuine disdain for Adam's apparent laziness, and just as genuine admiration for his heroic alter ego. And the dramatic irony of watching her navigate that without ever connecting the dots kept running through the series. The Sorceress of Grayskull occupied a different register entirely. Mysterious, ancient, cloaked in falcon imagery, the guardian of the castle's deepest secrets and the spiritual anchor of He-Man's power. Her presence gave the show a sense of weight and history that action sequences alone couldn't provide.
10 times more powerful.
You must find the gold chamber of the ancients.
The villains. And then there was Skeletor. That skull face, that laugh, that purple and blue hood draped over exposed bone. Skeletor was nightmare fuel for a generation, and kids absolutely loved him for it. His goal never wavered. Conquer Castle Grayskull, claim its power, rule Eternia. The simplicity worked because his menace came from relentless determination rather than elaborate scheming for its own sake. Every confrontation felt like it had real stakes, and his theatrical style, the dramatic monologues, the towering disdain for his own incompetent minions, provided a kind of villain comedy that balanced the genuine threat he posed. Watching him berate Beastman or belittle Merman was as entertaining as watching He-Man fight him, which is a difficult tonal line to walk, and the writers mostly pulled it off. Snake Mountain's full roster, Beastman's savage brute strength, Evelyn's dark magic and perpetual scheming, Trapjaw's interchangeable weapon arms made Eternia feel like a world with real danger around every corner. They gave He-Man and his allies something genuinely worth fighting week after week.
Pull yourself together, Cringer. The survival of our planet depends on us.
The journey and ending. The most memorable episodes. 130 episodes. 130 chances for He-Man to save the day, learn something, and send kids back to the playground a little bit more sure of themselves. Some episodes burned themselves into collective memory in ways that are hard to explain to anyone who wasn't there. The transformation sequences, lightning crackling as Adam raised his sword, Cringer crouching and then exploding into BattleCat's snarling bulk, never lost their charge. Not once across 130 repetitions. The show had found something elemental in that image and understood, wisely, not to mess with it. What distinguished the series from a lot of its contemporaries was how seriously it took its young audience. The Adventure of the Week format gave every episode a clean shape, but the show kept finding space within that structure for moments that genuinely resonated. Episodes that tackled peer pressure, or fear of failure, or what it felt like to be different. They handled those things with a straightforwardness that most children's programming avoided, either from timidity or from underestimating what kids could absorb. The moral segments at the end of each episode are easy to make fun of in retrospect. He-Man looking directly into the camera, delivering a tidy life lesson. But they worked because they were earned. 22 minutes of storytelling had built up enough goodwill that a minute of direct advice landed rather than annoyed. Don't judge others by appearance. Work together. Face your fears. Simple things said by someone kids actually trusted. The show understood that it had genuine influence over young viewers and decided, unusually for a property driven so nakedly by toy sales, to use that influence carefully.
I think I feel faint.
The ongoing mission. Season after season, the rhythm held. Skeletor hatched a scheme. He-Man stopped it. Castle Grayskull remained standing. The consistency was the point. This wasn't a show built around dramatic transformation or season-ending twists. It was reliable, warm, exactly what it said it was. And there's genuine value in that. Within that steady format, though, the writers kept finding ways to push the creative boundaries. Weather-controlling devices, dimensional portals, ancient artifacts with world-ending potential. The threats escalated in imagination even when the fundamental outcome stayed the same. Character relationships deepened quietly over time. The bond between He-Man and BattleCat, the mentorship between Man-at-Arms and Adam, the ongoing unresolved tension between Teela and the prince she couldn't quite bring herself to respect. Skeletor kept coming close enough to make each victory feel genuinely earned rather than foregone. That's a harder trick than it sounds.
Just as I suspected. Hollow, you metal-munching moron.
The origin they never told. The show kept Skeletor deliberately mysterious. No backstory, no family, just a skull and an obsession. But the original source material, the mini-comics that preceded and accompanied the cartoon, told a different story entirely. In those comics and early story concepts, Skeletor had a name, Keldor. And Keldor had a brother, King Randor, He-Man's father. The villain terrorizing Eternia was, in that version of the mythology, He-Man's uncle. The transformation from Keldor into the skull-faced sorcerer came from a battle with Randor, in which Keldor suffered a horrific acid injury, leaving him with nothing but bone beneath the hood. Tragedy had forged the monster. The cartoon never went near this. It was deemed too dark, too scarred with adult consequence for afternoon television. Skeletor was stripped of history and made into something cleaner and more absolute. Pure menace, no origin, nothing to complicate the moral picture. The mini-comics also showed more violent combat, more serious consequences, a world where the stakes felt genuinely physical. The television show smoothed those edges carefully away. These weren't deleted scenes waiting to be restored. They were foundational choices made early, entire layers of mythology set aside before the show ever aired. What remained was safer and more accessible. But there was something in those rawer, darker materials, some sense of Eternia as a place with real history and real wounds that never made it to screen.
Your daughter is the best warrior in Eternia.
Yes, I'm sure she'll be fine.
The ending that wasn't. Here's something most fans don't fully register until they think about it. He-Man never really ended. The final episode, The Cold Zone, was just another episode. Skeletor tried to use a weather-controlling device. He-Man stopped him. Credits rolled. No farewell, no final confrontation, no moment of resolution for any of the threads the show had been quietly accumulating for 130 weeks. American audiences simply stopped getting new episodes, and the series maintained its eternal present tense right through to the last frame. He-Man still protecting Eternia, Skeletor still scheming from Snake Mountain, Grayskull's secrets still unrevealed. No arc completed. No romance resolved. No villain fell permanently. The narrative threads didn't get tied up, because structurally, they were never meant to be. The show existed in a perpetual now by design. Each episode complete in itself, the overall story never building toward a destination. That made sense for what the show was, but it meant that when production simply stopped, there was nothing to announce it was over. Fans never got the moments the years of investment seemed to promise. Teela discovering Adam's secret and having to reckon with how completely she'd misjudged him. The sorceress's full history brought into the open. Skeletor's connection to the royal house of Eternia finally revealed. A real final battle. Instead, imagination filled the gaps, and playground debates about what would have happened outlasted the show itself by decades.
And now for my grand finale. I call my latest trick.
He-Man never really went away. The character proved too durable, too embedded in the imagination of an entire generation to stay quietly in the past. Revival attempts spanned 4 decades, new animated series, comic continuations, a live-action film that had its moments even if it didn't quite land, and more recently, a streaming series that reignited all the old debates about who these stories are really for and what they should look like now. The property keeps returning because something in the original formula genuinely worked. Each generation finds its own entry point into Castle Grayskull, and each time, some version of that original charge comes through. The animation has aged. Some of the storytelling shortcuts are more visible now. But the warmth of it, the earnestness of a show that actually believed in being good and tried to pass that belief along, that holds up in ways that are harder to manufacture than action sequences. From 1983 to its quiet, unceremonious conclusion, He-Man gave an entire generation more than afternoon entertainment. It gave us a hero who chose mercy over might, a world elaborate enough to live in for years, and, quietly, persistently, the idea that strength is most worth having when you use it to protect someone else. The plastic swords eventually got lost or thrown away. The action figures lost their accessories and then got lost themselves. But the things the show actually put into kids' heads, that being powerful comes with responsibilities, that mercy is harder and more valuable than force, that the people protecting you might be someone you've completely underestimated, those things have a way of sticking around. In our memories, he's still raising that sword. Who was your favorite character? Drop your memories in the comments. And if this brought back something good, the like button and subscribe are right there. More deep dives into the vault are coming.